Commander G1 pressed his palm against the cold metal viewport of the Coalition flagship Harmony's Edge. The stars looked different now. For the first time in 200 years, they weren't stained with the red glow of burning worlds. Pieces of twisted metal and scorched hull fragments drifted past like metallic snow, all that remained of the largest space battle in galactic history. The Devourers were gone. Finally gone. Behind him, the bridge hummed with exhausted relief. Officers from a dozen different species worked side by side, tall, blue-skinned Altarians with their crystal-like appendages, small, furry Corvani with their 6 arms dancing over, control panels and the stone-like granite folk whose deep voices rumbled through the deck plating. They had fought together, bled together, and somehow survived together. "All sectors report clear, Commander," announced Lieutenant Minho from the communications station. His voice carried the weight of someone who had barely slept in weeks. No. Devourer signatures detected across the entire grid. The bridge erupted in quiet celebration. It wasn't the wild cheering you might expect after such a massive victory. Everyone was too tired, too hollowed out by loss. But smiles appeared on faces that hadn't smiled in months. Tentacles curled in happiness. Crystalline beings chimed soft victory songs. G1 watched a Corvani engineer hug her Altarian partner, their different biology making the embrace awkward but heartfelt. These species had been enemies just 3 centuries ago. The Devourer threat had changed everything, forced natural rivals to become family. "Sir," called out Navigator Chanwu from across the bridge, "we're receiving victory confirmations from all Coalition fleets. The 7th Fleet reports the last Devourer hive ship destroyed near the Crimson Nebula. Admiral Sungho says their biosignatures went completely dark." Ji-won nodded, but something nagged at him. The Devourers had been ruthless, calculating. They'd consumed entire star systems, turned planets into breeding grounds for their larvae. Their hive ships were living fortresses that could regenerate damage in hours. They'd appeared from the galactic rim 2 centuries ago like a plague of living metal and hungry chitin, and now they were just gone. "All of them?" "Commander," came Admiral Hyejin's voice over the comm from her vessel, the Stellar Harmony. Her ship hung in space nearby, its hull scarred from countless battles. "Coalition Command, we're detecting some unusual energy readings from Sector 7, unknown origin." The celebration on the bridge quieted. G1 straightened, his combat instinct still sharp despite the exhaustion. "What kind of readings, Admiral?" "That's just it. We don't know. The signatures are massive, but clean. Too clean. No radiation. Scatter, no plasma residue. Whatever created these energy patterns has technology we've never seen." A chill ran down G1's spine. He'd learned to trust his instincts during the war. Right now, they were screaming that something was wrong. "Patch me through to deep space monitoring," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing Ensign Seojun at the monitoring station. The young officer looked confused and slightly frightened. Behind him, banks of sensors painted strange patterns in the air, geometric shapes that pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm. "Sir, we're picking up massive energy signatures," Seojun reported, his voice crackling over the long-range comm. "They don't match Coalition or Devourer tech. The patterns are different." "Different how?" G1 stepped closer to the screen, studying the sensor data. The energy patterns were unlike anything in the Coalition database. They moved with purpose, following paths that suggested intelligence, but the technology creating them was completely alien. "More advanced, sir. Much more advanced." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Advanced. Technology in this part of the galaxy meant only one thing: another threat. But where had it come from? The Coalition had mapped every system within 50 light years of the battlefield. There were no unknown civilizations powerful enough to generate energy signatures this massive. Lieutenant Haeun from the sensor station looked up with wide eyes. "Commander, I'm detecting similar readings in sectors 4, 9, and 12. Whatever this is, it's not isolated to one location." Tactical Officer Jonggin's scaled hands moved rapidly over his console. "Sir, the patterns suggest coordinated movement. These aren't random phenomena. Something is controlling them." Ji-won felt the victory celebration dying around him like air. leaking from a damaged hull. The crew sensed it too. After 2 centuries of war, they could smell approaching danger like predators scenting prey. "Get me a full spectrum analysis," he commanded. "I want to know what we're dealing with." As the crew worked frantically at their stations, Jiwon stared out at the debris field again. Somewhere out there in the darkness between the stars, something was watching them. Something that had remained hidden during the entire war, waiting for this exact moment. The Devourers might be gone, but the galaxy was far from safe. 3 weeks had passed since the victory at Kepler Station, but Captain Do-hyun couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His ship, the Silent Wind, glided through the void like a ghost, following energy trails that shouldn't exist. The reconnaissance vessel was small, built for speed and stealth rather than combat, perfect for investigating mysteries in the dark corners of space. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," announced pilot Yoonji from the helm. Her fingers danced across the control panel with practiced ease, adjusting their course to avoid floating debris. The Silent Wind had been her home for 5 years, and she knew every bolt and wire in the ship's hull. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that made everyone on the bridge freeze. Stretching out before them was a graveyard of ships unlike anything they'd ever seen. Thousands of vessels drifted in the eternal darkness, their hulls twisted and broken, creating a metallic maze that seemed to go on forever. "What in the void happened here?" whispered Yoonji, her voice barely audible above the ship's life support systems. But these weren't coalition ships, and they certainly weren't Devourer bio-vessels. Captain Do-hyun had seen plenty of both during the war. These craft were something entirely different, sleek and angular, built with sharp edges that seemed to cut through space itself. Their hulls were a dark metal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making them nearly invisible against the starfield. "Take us in closer," Do-hyun ordered, leaning forward in his captain's chair. "But stay alert. Whatever did this might still be around." Navigator Sumin worked the controls, guiding them deeper into the debris field. As they passed between the wrecked vessels, the crew began to notice details that made their blood run cold. These ships weren't just destroyed, they'd been surgically dismantled. Clean cuts ran through armor plating that should have been impossible to breach. Weapon systems had been precisely removed, leaving behind empty spaces that looked almost like surgical incisions. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Jiho from the science station, his voice tight with concern. "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from these wrecks. The weapon scarring, it's not random damage. These ships were taken apart by someone who knew exactly where to hit them." Communications Officer Bora looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Sir, I'm detecting traces of Devourer biomaterial mixed in with this wreckage, but it's different. Burned, maybe. Like it was exposed to some kind of energy weapon specifically designed to destroy organic matter." The Silent Wind drifted past a particularly large wreck, its hull split open like a flower. Inside they could see the remains of what looked like a sophisticated weapons system, but the technology was unlike anything in Coalition databases. Crystalline components glowed with residual energy, and metal alloys showed properties that defied known physics. "Run a full spectrum analysis on those weapon signatures," Do-hyun commanded. "I want to know what kind of firepower could do this." As Jiho worked at his console, the results began appearing on the main screen. Energy patterns, blast residue, molecular traces, all pointing to weapons technology that was centuries ahead of anything the Coalition possessed. But more disturbing was what the analysis revealed about the targets. "Captain," Jiho's voice was barely steady, "these weapon signatures, they're specifically designed to counter Devourer biology. The energy frequency, the molecular disruption, patterns. Whoever built these weapons studied Devourer physiology in incredible detail. They knew exactly how to kill them efficiently." Tactical Officer Min-seok spoke up from his station, his scaled hands trembling slightly over the controls. "Sir, if someone had this kind of technology, why didn't they help us during the war? We lost billions of people fighting the Devourers with inferior weapons." Before Do-hyun could answer, a sound pierced the bridge that made everyone's blood freeze. It was a distress signal, weak and filled with static, but unmistakably Devourer in origin. The clicking, chittering language that had haunted Coalition nightmares for 2 centuries crackled through the comm system. Bora's hands flew over her controls, trying to clean up the signal. "It's coming from deeper in the debris field, Captain. The transmission is old, maybe days, but the emergency beacon is still broadcasting. Put it through," Do-hyun ordered, though every instinct told him he didn't want to hear what the message contained. The alien voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike any Devourer communication they'd ever intercepted. Instead of the usual cold, calculating tone of the hive mind, this voice carried something the Coalition had never heard from their enemies before: pure, primal terror. The silent hunters, they come from the darkness between stars. The Phi. Voice was broken, desperate, punctuated by sounds that might have been Devourer equivalent of sobbing. "We thought we were the apex. We thought we were the ultimate predators. We were wrong. So wrong." Static filled the channel for several seconds before the voice returned, weaker now, fading. "They hunt us like we hunted others. No. Escape. No mercy. They know our weaknesses and they know everything. The darkness has eyes. The silence has teeth." The transmission cut to static, leaving the bridge of the silent wind in stunned silence. For the first time in their lives, they had heard a Devourer afraid. Something was out there in the dark, something that made the galaxy's most feared predators sound like frightened children. The emergency council chamber deep within Coalition Command buzzed with nervous energy as Dr. Young-ho stood before the holographic projectors, his hands shaking slightly as he prepared to reveal what he discovered. The recovered databanks from the mysterious debris field had taken him 3 sleepless weeks to decode, and what he'd found would change everything they thought they knew about the war. "They call themselves humans," he announced to the assembled. "Leaders," his voice echoing in the cavernous chamber. Representatives from dozens of species sat in stunned silence as the words sank in. "They've been fighting the Devourers for over 50 years, completely hidden from our senses." General Soo-young, her crystalline Altarian features reflecting the chamber's dim lighting, leaned forward in her floating chair. Her species had been fighting the Devourers longer than most, losing 3 entire star systems before the Coalition formed. "How is that possible? Our deep space monitoring networks cover every inhabited system in this galaxy sector." Dr. Young-ho activated the holographic display, filling the air above the council table with swirling data streams and tactical maps. "Their technology is built around stealth and asymmetric warfare. While we fought the main Devourer fleets head-on, with massive battle groups, they conducted guerrilla operations in deep space, learning their enemy, adapting, evolving." The display shifted, showing ship movements that had been invisible to Coalition sensors for decades. Sleek vessels appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at Devourer supply convoys and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. The tactical patterns were unlike anything the Coalition had ever attempted. Precise, surgical, devastatingly effective. "Look at these attack patterns," Dr. Young-ho continued, highlighting specific engagements. Every strike was calculated to maximum damage with minimal exposure. They targeted Devourer breeding ships, supply convoys, and isolated scout groups. Never the main fleets, where Coalition forces could detect the battles. Commander Tae-hyun, a veteran of the Battle of Rigel where he'd lost half his fleet, studied the tactical data with growing amazement. His scarred face showed the price of fighting Devourers with conventional tactics. These humans, they hit the Devourers where they were weakest. Supply lines, isolated outposts, breeding facilities. We were always fighting their main strength, while these humans were cutting their foundation out from under them. The holographic display zoomed in on specific battles, showing human ships using weapons that seemed to phase through Devourer bioarmor before exploding inside their targets. Energy beams that disrupted the neural networks connecting Devourer hive minds. Projectiles that carried toxins specifically designed to shut down Devourer regeneration systems. Every weapon they developed was purpose-built to counter specific Devourer advantages, Dr. Young-ho explained. While we were building bigger guns and thicker armor, they were studying Devourer biology and creating tools to exploit their weaknesses. Admiral Jisoo, her tentacles curling with anxiety, spoke from her position at the council table. But why? Didn't they reveal themselves? Why didn't they help us directly? Millions died in battles that could have been won easily with their technology. Dr. Young-Ho's expression grew darker as he manipulated the display, showing a new set of data streams. Because they weren't just fighting the Devourers. They were studying us too. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. The implications of those words sent chills through representatives who had thought the humans were potential allies. Every battle we fought, every strategy we used, every weakness we showed, they were watching, recording, analyzing. Dr. Young-Ho continued. Their stealth technology wasn't just hiding them from Devourers, it was hiding them from us. The display showed human observation posts positioned throughout Coalition space, sensor networks that had been monitoring Coalition communications for decades, detailed analysis of every major battle from the war. The humans had been building a complete picture of Coalition military capabilities, political structures, and tactical doctrines. They have detailed files on every Coalition species, Dr. Young-Ho revealed, bringing up specific data streams. Our ship designs, our weapons technology, our command structures, even psychological profiles of our military leaders. They know more about us than we know about ourselves. Commander Tae-hyun stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. You're saying they used us as a testing ground? Let us bleed and die while they gathered intelligence? The data suggests they were preparing for something. Dr. Young-Ho nodded grimly. Every observation, every analysis point to a long-term strategy. They weren't just fighting the Devourers. They were positioning themselves for what would come after. The council chamber erupted in heated discussions as species representatives tried to process the revelation. The Kovani delegation chittered angrily among themselves, while the Granite folks' deep voices rumbled with concern. The small, furry Zilkan representatives huddled together, their large eyes wide with fear. "Preparing for what?" asked Admiral Jisoo, her voice cutting through the chaos. "What could they possibly want after the Devourers are defeated?" Dr. Young-Ho looked around the chamber at the faces staring back at him. Allies who had fought together, species that had learned to trust each other through shared suffering and victory. His next words would shatter that trust forever. Based on their observation patterns and strategic positioning, I believe they were preparing to evaluate whether the Coalition species deserved to survive. The chamber fell into shocked silence as the weight of that statement settled over them. Somewhere out there in the darkness between stars, humanity was watching, judging, and preparing to make a decision about the fate of every species in the galaxy. The answer to what they had decided came 3 days later. The first sign came at 800 hours, Coalition Standard Time, when every deep space sensor array across 12 star systems lit up like festival fireworks. Admiral Kyungmin was drinking his morning coffee in Coalition headquarters when the alert started screaming through the command center. The bitter liquid spilled across his uniform as he watched the tactical display transform from peaceful green dots to a sea of unknown red contacts. "Sir," shouted sensor operator Heijin, her voice cracking with disbelief. "Massive fleet formations appearing simultaneously across all monitored sectors. By the void, I count over 800 vessels." The human fleet had materialized out of nowhere, dropping their stealth like actors removing masks at the end of a play. No technology in the known galaxy could hide formations of that magnitude, which meant they had chosen this exact moment to reveal themselves. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Admiral Kyungmin set down his coffee, cup, and moved to the main tactical display, his experienced eyes taking in the scope of what they faced. Each red dot represented a vessel, and the formations were spread across Coalition space like a carefully planned net. These weren't random appearances. Every ship was positioned at strategic points near major trade routes, military installations, and population centers. "Get me fleet dispositions," he ordered, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his stomach. "I want to know our response capabilities." Communications Officer Wu Jin worked frantically at his station, trying to contact Coalition fleets throughout the galaxy. The responses that came back painted a terrifying picture. Every major Coalition fleet was outnumbered at least 3-1, and that was assuming their weapons could even damage these mysterious ships. "Admiral," called out tactical analyst Jinhee, I'm getting detailed scans of the nearest formation. These ships, they're like nothing we've ever seen." The main screen shifted to show close-up images of the human vessels. They were predatory. Things, built with sharp angles and dark hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No decorative elements, no wasted space. Every line and curve served a purpose. These were weapons, pure and simple, designed by minds that understood war at a level the Coalition had never reached. The largest ships stretched over 2 kilometers in length, bristling with weapon systems that defied easy classification. Energy projectors that hummed with contained power, launch bays that could deploy fighter craft in swarms, point defense systems that tracked invisible targets with mechanical precision. Everything about them screamed lethal efficiency. "Those aren't exploration vessels or merchant ships," Admiral Kyungmin observed grimly. "Those are warships, every single one of them." Lieutenant Sang-yuk looked up from his analysis station, his face pale. "Sir, the power readings from their engines alone exceed our largest dreadnoughts, and that's just their propulsion systems. I can't even begin to calculate their weapons output." "Incoming transmission," reported Communications Officer Wu Jin, his voice tight with tension. "It's from the lead vessel in the Sol formation. They're requesting to speak with Coalition Command." Admiral Kyungmin straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put them through, let's see what humanity wants." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at their first human being. Captain Donghyuk, according to the identification tag, floating beside his image, appeared younger than expected, but carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen real combat. His uniform was simple, functional, without the elaborate decorations favored by Coalition officers. Behind him, the bridge of his ship was a study in efficient design. No wasted space, no unnecessary displays, just the tools needed to wage war effectively. "Coalition species," Captain Donghyuk spoke with calm authority, his words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "We are the Terran Defense Fleet. The Devourer threat has been neutralized permanently. We now begin evaluation protocols." The casual way he announced the complete destruction of an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 centuries sent chills through the command center. Admiral Kyung-min leaned forward, trying to project strength he didn't feel. "Evaluation of what?" he demanded, hoping his voice didn't betray the fear growing in his chest. Captain Donghyuk's expression remained perfectly neutral, like a surgeon discussing a routine procedure. "Your species' ability to prevent future existential threats. Over the past 50 years, we have observed Coalition military doctrine, political structures, and crisis response capabilities. Some species will be deemed suitable for alliance based on their demonstrated competence and strategic value." He paused, and that pause stretched like a blade held at the throat of civilization. "Others will require guidance to reach acceptable standards." The threat was delivered so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it took several seconds for the full implications to sink in. Across the galaxy, human ships began moving with mechanical precision. They didn't attack, didn't fire warning shots, didn't make demands. They simply positioned themselves at optimal tactical points and waited. Some formations took positions near Coalition military bases, their weapons trained on defensive installations. Others appeared near major population centers, hovering in orbit like patient predators. A few positioned themselves along critical trade routes, effectively controlling all movement through Coalition space. "Admiral," whispered Tactical Officer Minwoo, "they're not just positioning for attack. They're setting up a blockade. They could cut off supplies to entire star systems with a single command." Admiral Kyungmin watched the tactical display update in real time as hundreds of human vessels moved into position throughout Coalition space. Each movement was calculated, purposeful, part of a larger strategy that had probably been planned. For decades, the message was crystal clear. Humanity held the power of life and death over every Coalition species. They could destroy fleets, starve planets, or simply wait while civilizations collapsed under the weight of isolation. The evaluation had begun, and the galaxy held its breath waiting for the verdict. The Coalition Grand Assembly had never hosted a gathering like this one. Representatives from 43 different species filled the massive chamber. their varied forms creating a living rainbow of galactic diversity. But today the usual diplomatic chatter was replaced by tense silence as Fleet Admiral Sunwoo walked to the central podium, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind her, massive holographic displays showed the current positions of human ships throughout Coalition space. Each red dot represented vessels that could obliterate entire fleets, positioned with surgical precision at every strategic choke point in the galaxy. The message was clear without words. Humanity held every Coalition world at their mercy. Admiral Sunwoo was not what the assembled delegates had expected. She appeared relatively young, with calm eyes that seemed to see everything and judge it accordingly. Her uniform bore no elaborate decorations, no symbols of conquest or dominance. She looked like exactly what she claimed to be, a guardian, who had taken on a burden she never wanted. "We are the guardians you never knew you needed," she declared, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's advanced acoustics. Every translator in the assembly worked frantically to convert her words into dozens of different languages. When the Devourers reached our space 70 years ago, we had already watched them consume 3 neighboring civilizations. We learned from your failures. The Altarian delegation shifted uncomfortably in their crystalline seats. Their species had lost entire star systems to the Devourers, billions of lives snuffed out before they understood what they were fighting. The tall blue-skinned beings exchanged glances, remembering the horror of watching their colonies go dark one by one. "The Zalani Imperium fell in 6 months," Admiral Sunwoo continued, her tone factual rather than accusatory. "They tried to negotiate, believing rational beings could reach an understanding. The Cortex Federation lasted 2 years by building bigger weapons and stronger shields. The Vrex Collective held out for 5 years, using distributed military tactics." She paused, letting the weight of those failures sink in before continuing. "All of them made the same mistake. They treated the Devourers as an enemy that could be reasoned with, contained, or simply outfought using conventional warfare. They were wrong. We understood what you did not. This enemy could never be reasoned with, only destroyed utterly." The holographic displays shifted, showing tactical data from battles the Coalition had never known existed. Human ships engaging. Devourer fleets in the dark spaces between stars, using weapons that seemed to phase through bioarmor and disrupt the neural networks that connected hive minds. Every engagement was surgical, precise, designed to cause maximum damage with minimal exposure. "Your Coalition fought bravely but inefficiently." Admiral Sunwoo's gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes of military commanders who had lost friends and fleetmates in the war. "Too many of your species survived, only because we eliminated the Devourer reinforcements you never detected." General Huijin of the Kovani Defense Force stood up abruptly, his 6 arms gesturing angrily. "You let us bleed while you fought in secret. Billions died in battles you could have helped us win." Admiral Sunwoo's expression didn't change. "Your species learned valuable lessons through combat that they never would have gained through easy victory. The Corvani military is now 40% more efficient than it was before the war. Your survival instincts have been sharpened. You are better prepared for future threats." The cold calculation in her words sent chills through the assembly. She spoke of galactic warfare like a teacher discussing student examinations, weighing costs and benefits with inhuman precision. Prime Minister Neon of the Centauri Republic, her tentacles curled with nervous energy, spoke carefully from her floating platform. "What do you want from us? Tribute? Submission? Territory?" "Nothing," Admiral Sunwoo replied, and somehow that simple word was more terrifying than any demand could have been. "We offer you a choice." She gestured to the holographic displays, which now showed detailed threat assessments for every Coalition species. Color-coded charts rated military capabilities, technological advancement, political stability, and something labeled as existential threat potential. "Accept our protection and guidance, or prove you can defend this galaxy without our intervention. But understand this clearly. We will not allow another Devourer-level threat to emerge unchecked. We have spent 70 years perfecting the art of preventing galactic extinction events." The displays showed new images, deep space monitoring stations that could detect threats light years away, automated defense platforms positioned at strategic points throughout the galaxy, and vast manufacturing facilities that could produce war fleets faster than any known civilization. "Some of you will welcome our guidance," Admiral Sun Wu continued. "Others will resist, believing you can maintain galactic security independently. Both paths are acceptable, but the outcome remains the same. This galaxy will be protected whether you cooperate or not." In the viewing galleries above the main floor, representatives from smaller species watched the proceedings with growing fear. The humans weren't conquering. They were assuming responsibility for galactic survival, whether anyone wanted them to or not. The granite folk delegation, their stone-like features impossible to read, rumbled among themselves in voices that shook the chamber floor. The delicate sylph representatives floated nervously near the ceiling, their gossamer wings creating tiny whirlwinds of anxiety. "The age of coalition independence is over," Admiral Sun Wu announced with finality. "The age of human guardianship has begun." The human fleet held position throughout coalition space, patient as death itself. Some species would welcome their new protectors, seeing salvation in humanity's overwhelming power. Others would quietly begin planning resistance, unwilling to trade freedom for security. But deep in space, beyond the reach of coalition sensors, human monitoring stations continued their eternal vigil. Automated systems scanned the cosmic darkness, watching for signs of new threats that might emerge from the spaces between stars. The war against the Devourers was over, but the larger war, the endless battle against extinction itself, would never end. It had simply evolved, and humanity had made themselves its ultimate arbiters, the end.